What would happen if you wanted to get rid of somebody that you mostly hated throughout your period? I mean, like, hated so much that bullied you, abused you, and including that person you looked up to the most, that just took everything away from you in just that one single second. Just a word will change out the entire story. This would lead into Carnage, or better known as the Carnitrix. What if Deku had that? What would he actually get up to? Well, we'll find that out today. Hope you all enjoy. We're gonna have to make some slight changes to this story to make sure it makes sense. Everything would go similar to the canon counterparts of the story. Izuku would meet All Might, he would tell him he can't be a hero. But when Izuku saw Bakugo being trapped by the sludge villain, that's where things would change. Izuku would stand there in shock, not knowing what to feel. But a certain feeling went through him, as this feeling was odd to him, so he tried to explain it a lot more in that time he was there, but he didn't know what it was. As that feeling grew and grew in him at that moment, he realized it was pure joy to see his tormentor and bully dying right in front of him. As All Might would look over his shoulder to see the same kid that he, saved from that villain. As he would see the kid's eye, it was penis. He was confused, but he couldn't do anything about it. The best thing he could do was watch. In this timeline, All Might didn't act to save Bakugo, so somebody had to. Say, Death Arms finally had the balls to do it. Let's just say he did it for now. It'll add up later. Izuku headed home, and the moment he got through the door, Inka wasn't even home. Izuku went over to the counter to see a note on the desk. "I'll be home late, Izuku. Every single dinner and everything's in the fridge. Just needs reheating." This would tingle a little feeling at the back of Izuku's neck, feeling that disappointment around him. He would feel that even his mother doesn't want him. He doesn't know what to do anymore. He knows what the feeling he wants, and that feeling he will get. The feeling that he wants is to see the world burn, but he doesn't know how. After that day, about 2 days later, Izuku finally went back to school after staying in his room for a couple of days. But being in his room didn't help him so much. But something might help him. As Izuku finally went back to school, most people just barely ignored him. Some people threw insult, kill himself, and other things too. But that was all the normal for him. What isn't normal was Bakugo didn't do anything to him. When he was saved by Death Arms instead of All Might in the canon, he quite literally got a humbling, what he should have got prior to having his quirk. As throughout that day, Izuku was completely ignored, all the way until the end of the day, when Bakugo finally grew some balls and actually went over to Izuku. What he said next actually surprised Izuku for a little bit. But then everything changed automatically after when he said, "Izuku, I'm... Bakugo, what are you doing with that fucking nerd? You're not going to apologize to him, are you?" One of the lackeys said, as Bakugo's ego finally went back. As he punched Izuku while using a power punch with his quirk. As Bakugo, hasn't changed. He's still as bad as what he was. As Izuku thought he was going to change, but he was completely wrong. As Izuku ran for his day as normal. But one thing did catch his eye, however. Izuku looked through the window on the shop that he was near at the time, and he saw something that catched his eye, a book on gene splicing. Izuku thought that would be quite cool, but what would he splice it with? He could get All Might's DNA, but the chance of getting that is slim, Izuku thought. As with nothing left to lose, Izuku got the book and thought it was interesting. As the moment he arrived back home, same thing as yesterday happened. The same meal, the same result. Izuku was starting to get tired of this. As the moment he was about to hit the bed, he had an epiphany. This epiphany, however, kicked in and forced him to do something about it. If I can splice genomes and everything. Like, what's stopping me from splicing people together or stealing their DNA? But if I steal the DNA, how would I get about it? If the people know I'm actually stealing, or, well, stealing their powers, I'll end up getting arrested. But the only way for me to get away with it is... I got an idea, Izuku said out loud. Izuku spent weeks and hours on developing a way to steal people's genes without really knowing. I know people are going to say the pants genes, but you know what I mean, genetics, that type of thing. As Izuku would spend another couple of weeks to try and figure out a way to do this, there was no physical way to actually steal someone's quirk factor, he thought, until he made Bakugo bleed. The only way to actually get someone's blood is to make them bleed, or inject them, or steal them, or kidnap them. But Izuku figured out a way to get Bakugo's blood. As Izuku was getting ready, Bakugo came over to Izuku's desk. As everything would carry over, just like from canon, Izuku would be told by Bakugo to kill himself, as this would be the excuse Izuku needed to make Bakugo bleed. As Izuku grabbed his, well, I can't say what I want to say or I'll get fucking banned on YouTube, but let's just say it's a weapon. Izuku grabbed it and threw it over to Bakugo's head, leaving him a broken nose, well, a popped out eye, and other things. Izuku managed to, well, put something in front of Bakugo's face to grab his blood, as Izuku stormed out of the class, leaving Bakugo on the floor, bloodied and beaten and bruised. As Izuku headed home, well, somewhat of a home, and grabbed all the stuff he needed, and headed out to, well, where he'll be experimenting from now on. As Izuku would head over to a factory on the east side of Misatofu, he would sit there and think to himself, this will be all worth it. Just rely on me, it'll be all worth it, Izuku thought. As Izuku spent weeks after that, leading into the 5th month period of where he would be training for the entrance exam. But this bit is leading into where he would be right now. Izuku managed to actually find the genetic gene fact quirks, but there was a problem. He didn't know how to get it out, how to separate from the person's body so he could inject it into himself, but he's not that advanced yet. As Izuku would spend hours of that day trying to figure out a way to actually, well, searching for the web. As Izuku would spend hours on his day to actually figure out a way to splice people's DNA, until he came across a doctor that actually had the quirk genetic gene factor. Well, theory, of course, of the doomsday prophecy that quirks would actually evolve too far that would actually destroy the human body. Well, he isn't wrong. 5 hours later, after he tracked down, well, Dr. Yujiko's dress, Izuku would look up to think, is this it? It looks like a really small factory, but he is a genius, so I'm thinking this might be it. Izuku would walk in, not actually checking to see if anyone, well, by knocking, of course. It's idiotic. As Izuku would spend about 3 minutes looking through until an alarm went off. Izuku covered his ears until a big brained Nomu grabbed Izuku by his neck and pinned him down. As Dr. Yujiko came running through to see who was the intruder, until he saw a kid, about 5'7", 5'8", laying on the ground with his arms pinned. Kid, what are you doing here? Dr. Yujiko said. I saw you online that you could find a way to split the quirk factor, Izuku said. And who are you? I'm a quirkless child wanting to learn quirks, Izuku said. Nomu, let him go, Dr. Yujiko said, trusting the kid for a second. How'd you get my address? I googled it, Izuku said. My name isn't on Google, or any form of social media for that matter. I made sure of it, Dr. Yujiko said. Well, it seems like you didn't try hard enough, he said, As Izuku and Yujiko both banged Dr. Yujiko banged his head against the wall, asking himself, "I'm a fucking idiot," he said, as Izuku was allowed in to, get an example of what's happening here. "Kid, how old are you?" "I'm 16. "And what's your motivation in life?" "Oh, to kill All Might," he said, smiling. "Huh, said first. Last kid I found that actually wanted that was Shigaraki," he said internally. "Maybe we can mold this kid into an actual villain after all," Yujiko said. "So, what's your plans for the future?" "Well, I want to create a device that can clone heroes' powers and kill them with their own powers," Izuku said. "So you want to create an Omnitrix type of thing for Ben 10, right?" "Well, I don't know what that is, but yes, sure," he said. "It's going to be interesting, but yeah, let's have a go with it, shall we?" he said. As Izuku and Yujiko spent months trying to develop, a cloning gene to try and, split the DNA into, a compact area to use the transformation. As Dr. Yujiko and Izuku would spend more and more time together, building a more father-son relationship, but of Inko, she never really, she really just kept him around to keep the welfare going. But Izuku gathered that by the time he turned 8, but, it kinda sucks for him, really. Dr. Yujiko, before the entrance exam kicked off, Izuku actually managed to get one DNA sample inside of, his version of the watch. "Well, Dr. Yujiko," Izuku said, "so you made the model. Cool. But the problem is, though, Izuku, how are you going to be able to fit all those DNA samples inside of that one watch?" "Well, I have thought of that, but the compression might work," Izuku said. "Do you know the only person with the compression power is the guy who made magic, right? And if we want to find him, we're going to have to get All For One involved," Dr. Yujiko said. "Yeah, but isn't you friends with All For One, though? You've known him for almost 100 years now." "Yeah, but he's on the offside currently. If you know, you know. Izuku, you really need to watch your tone around him. If you don't, there's a chance you might die," he said. Dr. Yujiko called over Kurogiri and patted him on his head. "Kurogiri, I need you to bring this little Izuku here to All For One," he said. "Wait, you want me, Master?" "Yes, please do," he said, as Kurogiri opened the portal for Izuku to hop through, leading him to All For One. As Izuku was dropped on his behind, as he was standing in front of All, face to face with the man who injured All Might, as Izuku laid his head down, as he was humbled in his view. "What do you want, child? I heard you're building a device." "Yes, I'm building a device with your scientist," Izuku said. "What type of device is that you're building?" "Well, it's a watch to basically transform you into any hero or whatever actually we installed it," Izuku said. "Would it be worth the investment in you, I wonder?" All For One said. "I'm worth what investment?" Izuku said. As All For One let out his arm to grab onto Izuku's head, leading to Izuku to feel a massive amount of pain, leading him collapse onto the floor. "Let's see if this would be worth it by the time you wake up," he said. "The quirk that I have given you will give you the chance to stockpile DNA inside of your blood. Once this is activated, you'll feel the difference," the man said, as we skip a couple of hours later when Izuku finally awakened. He didn't feel difference, but Yujiko caught up with what he was saying, or what All For One did. "So the quirk that he gave me allows me to stockpile genetic mega, so you can make your watch by connecting to your quirk now," Izuku, the doctor said. "So how long would you think it would take me to learn it?" Izuku said. "Well, a couple of days, maybe a year. couple of years. The quirk is very, let's say, intense on the body. If you make a bunch of DNA and mix it, then you probably will get something that looks more alien than human. As Izuku understood what Dr. Yujiko said. So, let's get started, Izuku said, copying into the beaker, containment unit, as Dr. Yujiko started injecting Izuku with loads and loads of quirk factors into his own quirk factor in itself. Izuku felt loads of pain, then no pain at all. The moment the pain receptors kicked in, he felt like he was more or less comfortable with where he was. But the moment Izuku left the containment field, however, his quirks kicked off and forced him to transform into what we know as the cursed version of, Heat Blast, of course. As the moment fucking Dr. Yujiko actually managed to get near him and slap on that watch that he created, the moment it touched Izuku's skin, Dr. Yujiko on the spot, leaving him burnt to death. As the Omnitrix, the Carnitrix in this case, solidified with Izuku's skin, bonding to him as it went along. As Izuku finally de-transformed after a couple of minutes of rampaging around his lab. As Izuku managed to get his mind intact, but his body was still moving on its own, as a red light shined from the watch on his wrist as he de-transformed from his entire transformation. As when he got his whims against him, Izuku looked up to see all the mindless destruction he caused just by losing his mind. As Izuku had a wicked smile on his what he did, he managed to do something the unthinkable. He created the godlike thing known as a quirk. Not even a quirk, you would think. It felt like God's power was in his hands and he could control it. I wonder what else I have, Izuku said as he popped up the faceplate. Time to cause some chaos, Izuku said out loud as the faceplate changed into a diamond shape. As one thing popped up that was really interesting to him. A man with horns on his head and little stars surrounding his body, but that didn't interest him more than what the other islands were. Thousands upon thousands of genetic A-makers in that watch he could activate, but there was things to do and things to make. And Izuku would go outside and breathe in a sigh of relief. It's time to cause some chaos, as that's where we're going to leave today's episode. I was planning on making this a one-shot series, but I've actually managed to make it similar. This is the Carnitrix, it's just in my own way. I know the way the Carnitrix is meant to be made. It's meant to be he gets it and he destroys everything in his sight. That's going to happen. It's going to happen in the next episode. It's just going to take me a minute to set up. Thank you all for watching and see you all later. Goodbye.